All right, Bill Kennick here in Alliance, Ohio, and this is noon. It's actually 10 minutes after 12. I think the horoscope was calculated for about noon Eastern Standard Time. So what? January 19th, 2024. And our law firm's been in business for 100 years now, because my dad started in 1924 and didn't do much. And and he was a lawyer for life, of course. So then I started law school just before he died, and became a lawyer and didn't do much. But it's been 100 years of not doing much, so that's something, ain't it? Now I'm gonna excuse myself here. I'm 76 years old now, bald, gray, senile, and I mentioned something about doing law. I was never terribly good at that. But I will say one thing. Yeah, I guess this leads me into the main, well, not the main point, but I did a video for the first time in a couple of years, just about an hour ago, and I said something about the Middle East, and I said that the Israelis were slaughtering the Palestinians. Well, coming back to a course I had from one Hamilton the Second, capital D, small e, capital S, small a, small u, small s, small u, small r, small e, Hamilton the Second. I took international law from him. I think I also took air and space law and admiralty. But anyway, somewhere along the line, he said there is such a thing as, in law, as reprisals. So rather than, and in this case, rather than saying the Israelis were slaughtering the Palestinians, we could say they were taking reprisals on the Palestinians for the injury they suffered on October 7th. So reprisals, Then they would get into the issue, well, were those reprisals proportionate to the injury? Well, 24-1 ain't bad. It's not a bad return on. They had 1,000 people killed, and they've now killed 24,000 in reprisal. So, okay, so here we are. Now, I think I might do a couple videos today because it's snowing outside. And rather than do something really socially useful, I think I'm going to give my opinion on things, which would be sort of the culmination of 76 years of misdirected interest. Now, one of the things I kind of do a lot more than law is astrology. I've been fiddling with it since I was 20. Well, I was even trying to do it before then, but when I finally met a real astrologer named Joe Martin in Cleveland, Ohio, and he told me to get the book by Margaret Hone. I don't know, it was beginner's astrology book or something, but anyways, a big blue book about that thick, and Margaret Hone is the word. So if that one's still available, I could, there's an awful lot of crap out there. There was then, and there still is. Now there is more on the internet too. But Margaret Hone would told you how to make a horoscope and basically to learn the keyword approach. So if you learn the keyword for Jupiter, for example, here Jupiter is on the cusp of the first house. Jupiter means expansion, right? Also means good health, and other things, philosophy. But you learn the keywords for Jupiter. Then you learn the keywords for the first house. So expansion in the first house is now the first house means one's own body, one's own self, or the question at hand. If you do a horary chart, horary chart being when you cast a horoscope for the question that was asked, or maybe for the event that just happened. Now, in the case of the event is an idea, the idea is presumed to be real enough that you could cast a horoscope for it. Although, I do a lot of horary charts. I cast, with computers it's very easy. You just click on, you want the horoscope of the exact second, or, the exact minute anyway, that you ask the question, and you get a chart. And so, a lot of these ideas of mine are very fleeting. And they're not always, great charts. But normally, if you're serious about your question, then you ask a question, a chart will come up. Now, in this case, thanks to the good folks at astro.com, they will do your horoscope for free. Now, don't ask them what it means. If you want to know what it means, you pay. You'll pay one of the astrologers on the payroll there. But if you just want to know where the planets were at that time, all right, you're going to do a horary chart, and I did one here for around noon. Today. I had to decide, well, do I want a horoscope flashing, changing every minute as I talk, or do I just want a fixed horoscope that doesn't change? And I thought, well, no, I want a fixed horoscope. Technically that was easier, and also, you could get kind of spacey if you try to chase the planets. Or at least that was hard for me. The theory came up. I know about 50 years ago I was talking about making a computer that would calculate a horoscope every minute, And now, of course, that's very easy. But 50 years ago that was harder, and it took me 20 years to do it. But I finally had a computer that calculated a horoscope every minute. Then it went to another computer, memory being less than it is today, that I had a bunch of canned interpretations. It took me about 20 years to come up with all the midpoints of Mercury and Venus. What does that mean? Well, it's the intersection of thinking and love, or sweet thoughts. See? Sweet thoughts. Oh, sweet thoughts. Mercury, Venus, midpoint. And then, I was using a lot of very obscure planets that we didn't even have all the asteroids yet. Now it's, one could go on forever, which is the fun of it, because you say, well, what, will we have all our problems solved in 1,000 years, assuming civilization lasts that long, and assuming we improve? What challenges will be left? And you want my opinion? It seems like as soon as we do something good, there are people who, probably through fear and greed, will make it bad again. So then there's the necessity of doing better, and then that goes on and on. I mean, we could see it in the area of weaponry. Not that's really where I'm going with this conversation, but if the United States invents a 1-ton bomb, then the Russians are going to come up with a 1.2-ton bomb, or some bomb that will annihilate the 1-ton bomb. So then the United States gets busy, and then of course this keeps a lot of people in work. creates a lot of profits for guys that do this. But that's anyway. So there's always progress, you might say. Now, here's another example. The internet was a good thing, right? Or at least I thought so. 25 years ago, when I was doing the internet, and it wasn't quite. The big dogs hadn't taken it over yet. Well, that's part of the story, though. But the internet was a good thing. I would do horoscopes on it and, read charts. And in fact, I did a number of free charts, because people at that time, it was a miracle that they found anybody that read charts. And sure enough, I said, well, I'll do a few free ones. So, people set me in their time and they said, will you do a free chart? Yeah, sure. And I read it and using the same rules. Now, whether I was right or wrong, I don't know. But, I was sincere, and I do believe that there is something to this. So, if you follow the rules, you'll get some reading that means something. Now, here's, in this case, this question is kind of about World War III. Which today I'm predicting World War III to happen tomorrow, and keeping in mind that most of my predictions are off. I'm not rich, and I've been predicting the stock market for about 50 years, and I'm still poor as a church mouse. So you can see that something went wrong in my predictions, or maybe my predictions are fine. It's just that I'm not very good at betting, which is another question. But I would say that by this time, my predictions are often wrong, but I like to do them. And if I explain what I'm doing, some of you may learn something from me and do better, even. But here we have Jupiter, and I'm not sure. See, I can point. I think I need another camera to show me pointing, or I'd have to have a. Oh, I wonder if that arrow would work. Well, we'll try that. Okay, here's Jupiter in the first house, which means expansion, and then Apollo, which is kind of like a Jupiter and a Venus combined, but this also means activity. So great expansion of activity, and normally that's very good, Except in this case, we're talking about the expansion of an activity that happens to be a war. So where does the war show up? Well, I don't know. I was thinking, my premise was that Pluto and the sun going into the next sign. And I read this from some other astrologer, had a nice article on when Pluto and the sun march step by step, into Aquarius, which will be tomorrow. Then we should have a heck of a bang. Yeah, so, but what means war? We'll get to that after my preliminary thoughts. Also, I have to get better glasses so I can see this chart. Maybe these scholarly Harry Potter glasses will do better. Yeah, not much. Anyway, Jupiter and the Apollo are on the axis, which means an expansion of activity. So we'll have to find out, what planet means war. Well, we could look at Mars is the god of war, so that would be one candidate. And we see the god of war is up here in the 9th house at 11 of Capricorn. Pluto is the planet of boom, 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 and that's in 29. So we take the midpoint of 11 and 29. One way to do that is to add the two together. So you get 40, and then divide by 2 and you get 20. But let's assume that it is 20. Okay, then from 11 to 20 is 9 degrees, and from 20 to 29 would be 9 degrees. So 20 would be the the midpoint of Mars Pluto. Okay, now on this particular chart we got lucky, because the midheaven is in 1945, which ask you the question a minute later, it would have been 20. So we got Mars plus Pluto equals midheaven. And if you want to know what that means, I have this old book here, Rules for Planetary Pictures. And Witte, Alfred Witte was the one that came up with a lot of these readings. Then he had a student named Sigerin, and this was in the 20s and 30s. There was a gentleman named Hans Nigemann that published an American version, years later. And then I think these guys here, this was published by Udo Rudolph after Hans Nigemann, who they claim stole the whole thing. But I could tell you more stories. But anyway, this one was published by, look here, Ludwig Rudolph, and Udo Rudolph in Hamburg, being a big astrologer. And that's a good big astrology family. But anyway, Mars plus Pluto. Looking here, see, this is a much used book. Here's how it's falling apart. This is still. Our Mars plus Pluto means organizing. Now we're going to look at what it says minus midheaven in a minute. But just as a general way of reading this stuff, you can look at the Mars plus Pluto, planning, plans, duplicate to copy, and then you look down further, equals midheaven, equals Aries, equals, and I had a teacher, Alphonse Sears, that said, when you want to know these things, read the first 4 or 5, because they all sort of duplicate each other, and they all relate to personal points. So, but once in a while, there's a keyword there that was ignored in the other readings, and that's the one that just has to hit right on. So, when they say astrology is an art, not a science, well, anyway, the art part is where you guess. You got 5 possibilities, right? Now, if you're really good, you might be able to eliminate some of the possibilities by looking at the other planets and narrow it down. And I think what more often happens is you just pull something out of the air. But that's because you've been educated at it. And, it might be because you're psychic, but also because, you build after you do it for a while, you get better at it, let's say. Okay, Mars, Pluto. Organizing, planning, plans, duplicate, to copy, to repeat, to multiply, to lead, to supervise or perform several activities at the same time, to divide, to split, to branch off, to branch. And then minus midheaven means organizer, maker of plans. Here, organizer, maker of plans, attending to several jobs at the same time, to do them alternately. All right, well, so, but just reasoning this out, what does Mars mean? Mars means your activity, or possibly your work. And the midheaven of, the midpoint of Mars and the midheaven is often known to mean your job. But here we're combining. Here we're looking at the midpoint of Pluto, and Pluto means to multiply. In fact, Pluto also represents the atomic bomb, because Pluto describes fission. It was when things keep splitting. Now, if you do a splitting in a Plutonian fashion, note also the word plutonium, the element, but if you keep splitting and splitting and splitting, and then you get a chain reaction, and that's how they make atomic bombs. Boom. See. So one of the things we could say here is, since we're predicting World War III, somebody's going to blow off a bomb. Yeah, a big bomb, and so that would be I could be the first astrologer that predicted an atomic bomb and was right. I mean, a lot of people, including myself, make a lot of predictions, haphazardly. But nobody has blown off an atomic bomb yet, except the United States on Japan many years ago. The United States being, so far, the only outfit to blow off an atomic bomb. Well, let's say, looking at this chart, here's an idea we might come up with. Who would be likely to blow off an atomic bomb, assuming we have boom, okay? So we look at the midheaven is 19 of Capricorn, or 20, 19 or 20 of Capricorn. Or we look at, who blowing off a bomb. Who does that, in other words, who could? We have, about 10 countries have bombs now, at least that we know of. So who would it be? Right now, I can't think of an approach. We could compare it to the chart of the United States. Gemini ascendant, or we could say, well, the United States is a Cancer, born in July 4th. And that's the 13 of Cancer. So if we saw something came up 13 of Cancer, we say, oh, well, that's the United States. Now, by the way, let's look down here. Here's Kronos in 14 of Cancer, Hades in 12, and Lowell, which the asteroid, which I've been trying. I'm a fan of Percival Lowell, who looked at Mars. So I look at, I keep the asteroid Lowell in my charts, for no good reason other than I'm interested to find out what it means. And I think, after, screwing around with Lowell for about a year or two now, I think, remember, he was the discoverer of Pluto, although he didn't live to see it happen, but Clyde Tombaugh discovered Pluto. But he was certainly the man that was looking for Pluto. And he was also looking for Mars canals. So Lowell would be logically, related to Pluto and Mars. Now, as it turns out, later on astrologers say, well, Pluto is the higher octave of Mars, which means that, Mars is kind of an aggressive boom thing, but will taken to another exponent or something, or, you have Pluto. They also say, Neptune is the higher octave of Venus, and Uranus is the higher octave of what? I would guess Mercury. Look it up. I don't know, but so I don't really know that one. But they do say Pluto is the higher octave of Mars. Well, those two do relate pretty well to Lowell. So here we have Lowell down here. Here's to see the pointer. Down in the third house. The third house is also being the house of Gemini, by the way. If you say, okay, well, we're going to read the mundane houses 1, 2, 3. 1 means something. The third house means transportation and communication, brothers and sisters, and so on. Well, what does the third sign of the zodiac mean? Oh, guess what? Transportation, communication, brother and sister. 99% of astrologers believe that the meanings of the sign Gemini and of the third house will be at least similar. Now, there was an astrologer once I read that disagreed with that. He said, no, it's a whole different basis, and that and they're not that similar. But I forget who he was. But for now, I'm just going to say, okay, the third house represents Gemini, and Now, how do you compare that? Well, here's also, we're looking at Cancer, right? Cancer, the United States was born July 4th. I believe the United States' sun is 13 of Cancer. And here we have Kronos. And by the way, these are Uranian planets from Uranian astrology. Back to this book here. So, Uranian astrology, as they will explain to you in astro.com, these planets do not exist. And that's what they say. What I say is they work. And if they work, something exists. You know, like Alphonse Sir says, well, there must be certain fields. You know, that's how he could go with it. But there's some point of energy there, or something. That I say they work. Now, okay, Kronos is supposed to be like authority. Kronos would be the higher octave of Saturn. You know, Saturn means authority, and Kronos is even a higher authority. Hades is sort of a crummy planet, which has to do with it's like a waning moon. And a waning moon is okay, let's say the moon is, a woman, right? A waning moon, that's a decaying moon. That would be an older woman, an old crone, let's say. Now, what else is in a process of deterioration besides an old crone? And if you don't like that, all right. But Hades, well, if you catch or get cancer, that's deterioration of the moon, is the body of the fluids, see? Precious bodily fluids. What else is the deterioration? Well, if you look at Hades is supposed to represent the past or history. So if you're interested in archaeology or history or something to do with the past, this is, the past is constantly receding from us as we move forward into the future. So Hades represents, archaeology and the past, and interest in those kind of things. So these are on the United States. So the United States is what? Looking at its past at the same time as trying to maintain its authority. And with Lowell, you have Mars and Pluto. Now, Percival Lowell was a very progressive man. I mean, he's like my hero, He was, how would you combine Lowell? He was quite a scientist. He made a science of experimental scientist, you might say. He was looking for the right place to observe Mars from. He made up his mind after he'd heard that an Italian named Schiaparelli had discovered canals on Mars. Percival Lowell said, all right, I'm going to do that. And he had already spent years doing occult Japan, for example. He wrote that book. But, he was done with Japan. And he said, he saw the Schiaparelli, saw canals on Mars. So Lowell said, So he set about, he was a rich man. His brother was president of Harvard University. First of all, he borrowed a telescope from his brother from Harvard University. And he set about sending some expeditions, not himself, but people went to different mountains, and different places in this hemisphere, I believe, and looking for the best place to observe Mars from. And one of the things that had to be, you had to be away from lights, so you wouldn't be observing Mars from New York, let's say. Well, it's been done. But he said, we want it dark, but also the main thing is we want good seeing. And seeing is something that, if you're an amateur astronomer, you're very interested in seeing. And that's when the stars don't shimmer too much, or when you're looking at a planet and you're trying to find some really fine detail. You don't want the air, right outside your telescope to be shimmering, and all the way up, through, 1,000 miles until you're out of the atmosphere of the Earth, or 100 miles. You don't want the air to be shimmering. So if the less shimmer you have, the better seeing. And so he had a scientific approach, you might say, or at least an experimental approach. We're going to send guys with telescopes out to these different places and find out where the seeing was good. And he figured out a way to do that. That you put the telescope slightly out of focus, and then you see these weird patterns but those. You see bubbles bubbling up, and that's the atmosphere. See, when you just point your telescope at a planet like Jupiter, and then put it out of focus, and you'll see these. It's like a pot boiling water. You see these bubbles coming up and so on. He says, well, that's the seeing. So he invented a scale. All right, on a scale of 1 to 5, how's the seeing? Terrible would be 5, and and good would be, let's say, 1 or 0 or something like that. So, but anyway, that's what Lowell did. So it's some kind of a systematic thing. So coming back to what what Lowell might mean, it's a systematic approach to Hades, a systematic approach to archaeology, sponsored by the state. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know, but that's how you would do it. All right, I tell you what now. I've got things to do. Like I have to blow my nose, so I'm going to stop this video, and we'll call this part 2, and I'll start another video in a few minutes, and maybe get to the point of World War III in the next episode. So for now, this is Bill Kennick saying, hold on to your hats. World War III is starting.